Israel has banned Al Jazeera from reporting from there. So let's go to Sara, who joins us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman. And Sara, I know we've been keeping a close eye on these protests throughout the evening in Tel Aviv, but in the last half hour or so, they've turned from what was relatively peaceful to quite violent clashes between protesters and police.
Yeah. That's right, Tom. I'm just looking at the pictures here. Obviously, as you were saying, we can't report from there because we've been banned, but we have been covering these protests right from when they first started, certainly when the families of those held captive were gathering in what's known as Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. We were there all of the time that we were covering those protests on Saturday. They started off relatively peaceful, and certainly this is the first time, if you're looking on your screens now, you'll see the horses turning up. They've already brought out the dirty water known as skunk water as well, tanks. And also we've been seeing some protesters being arrested. And that's because they're blocking one of the main intersections in Tel Aviv, in central Tel Aviv, in fact. And that's something a lot of the anti-government protesters and those that are protesting against the Prime Minister, in fact, calling on him to immediately resign, they said, because of the handling of the war, because half of those that were taken captive, almost 125 of them, are still stuck in Gaza, and their families don't know whether they're still alive or dead. Many of them have been speaking today. One of those is a mother of one of those that was killed and their bodies brought back yesterday, saying that enough is enough. We need answers, and we need to see the rest of those that are still stuck there to be brought back. This, as we're seeing, and it seems that there will be talks taking place next week. Israeli media has been reporting that it will possibly take place in Qatar. Hamas has also come out with a statement saying that it won't be held on Tuesday, contrary to what Israeli media is reporting. So the details are still very much unclear. But the tensions that you're seeing in those pictures, that's certainly a step up from what we've been seeing in the last few weeks. Anger from the side of the protesters, anger from the sides of the families at the stalemate. They feel that they're not getting anywhere with this war. Some of the families have also been speaking on public TV, saying that they were told by the Israeli military that they had finished in the north of the Gaza Strip, that they'd eliminated Hamas and the fighters and the commanders, in fact, in the north, and that's why they moved on to the center of the Gaza Strip and then onto the south in Rafah. Well, there they are again in Jabalia now today. It's the 14th or 13th day even since the Israeli troops have returned. Yes, they managed to retrieve those 3 bodies, but the biggest concern the families of those captives have is that they will come back dead, and that's their biggest worry. And on top of that, just today as well, more rockets coming from Lebanon in the northern part of the country. So a lot of those families, a lot of those hotels in and around that square that you're seeing are housing those that had to be forced out of their homes from that northern border and from the border with the Gaza Strip, and they're losing money. They want to go back to their lives, and they're seeing no results so far, and that's why they're angry, but they're also being met by what seems to be some form of force. If you look on social media and if you look at those that are speaking out, they're saying that this kind of force is absolutely unnecessary, and they will continue, they say, to protest until they see those results, Tom.
Yes, Sara, you're talking about tension overflowing into anger, just the frustration after months and months of this war going on with the Netanyahu government, the war cabinet. These protests are obviously designed to try and put as much pressure on the Prime Minister and his cabinet as possible. Is there any sign at this stage that that pressure is actually working?
Well, and I just keep looking to the side because I'm looking at the pictures as we speak, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it seems, had a meeting a few days ago with some of those that are in the know on the negotiations, and it seems it was a result of some of the pressure that the families had put on the war cabinet, and that was after they had released a video showing 5 female soldiers that had been kidnapped and taken across to Gaza on October the 7th. It was very gory. It was quite detailed, and in fact today they've been showing that in front of the Kiryat, that's the Defense Ministry, on a massive screen, and they said that they had hoped by showing that video that it would put pressure on Netanyahu and also on the government. This at a time when Israel is also facing huge backlash. Obviously we saw the ICJ order yesterday, and then there's also ICC chief prosecutor that's seeking an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. So on the international stage, they can see that Israel is coming under a lot of scrutiny. Now, when you hear from the families, what they're now starting to say is that they feel that every decision that's being taken isn't with the captives in mind, isn't with the families in mind. What's in it for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and certainly for those within this far-right government, is that they say that the decisions are politically motivated and to save themselves. When we talk about saving themselves, why is that? Because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing a trial within his country that goes before he even got elected to become the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, through this coalition government. And also on top of that, now with the seeking of an arrest warrant, it could potentially mean that at some point it would be taken further. So the concerns here are that this is personal and politically motivated, and that when it comes to the interests of the families and those held captive, they say they want an immediate end to the war, and that they feel that their government isn't representing them and doesn't have their interests to heart.
Sara, some really quite remarkable scenes that we are watching unfold on the streets of Tel Aviv now. The police clearly moving in and trying to disband this large group of protesters that are trying to hold their ground at this point in time. As you say, these started out as just peaceful protests that we have seen every Saturday evening in Tel Aviv for months now, but we've never seen them escalate to this level in recent times. Sara,
yeah,
you talked a little bit about how politically motivated the cabinet, the war cabinet is, that they basically just want to save themselves, save their own political necks at this point in time. Can you just talk a little bit about how fractured that cabinet is right now between the decisions that Netanyahu is making on the ground and the pressure that clearly is coming on them from Israelis themselves?
Yes, absolutely. When you look at the divisions, those fractures didn't appear right in the beginning when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu formed a small war cabinet that included people with previous experience, and they stayed united. But over the weeks, over time, you started to see some cracks appear. And certainly a couple of weeks ago, if I remember correctly, one of those war cabinet members came out with a scathing speech against Prime Minister Netanyahu and really calling out those divisions. And then just a few days ago, through a Freedoms of Act, it was revealed that the Israeli military had, it seemed, warned the Prime Minister and warned the government that those divisions that existed in the country because of them wanting to introduce judicial reforms was weakening them in front of what they said were the eyes of the enemy, for them, for the Israelis, for example, for Hamas. And those warnings, it seems, weren't just internal, but it seems also Egypt, for example, had a few months ago said that they had also indicated that there could be some potential security breach. So, you know, the people, the leaders of this country were so busy with these anti-government protests and judicial reforms before the war. And not just that, Tom, busy by sending all their troops to the occupied territories. For example, occupied West Bank, every day we see raids, daily, every single night. People are arrested, families, mothers, people's homes are demolished in those occupied territories, in occupied East Jerusalem, for example. And that's exactly why on October the 7th, where were all the forces when they needed them on that border with Gaza? A lot of them were in the West Bank, and that's exactly one of the reasons why a lot of those families of those captives blame Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the army, because they said that they had dropped the ball. They put their focus elsewhere, and what mattered was the warnings that something may be brewing. Now, that's in terms of the divisions. When you also look at, for example, the ICJ order that we heard yesterday, the discussions that are happening in Israel are at the moment is that they believe the Supreme Court, which is independent in Israel, should be looking into the situation and these accusations and looking into whether the military has created or breached international humanitarian law, which could potentially then help them if this is taken further on the international stage. But they're not doing that. They say they're investigating some of the comments made by ministers, far-right ministers, for example, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Israeli national security minister, or the finance minister who's also in charge of the illegal settlements in occupied West Bank, that's Bezalel Smotrich. They've made incredibly inflammatory remarks which could amount to incitement of genocide. For example, they have repeatedly said that they welcome anyone from Gaza volunteering to leave the Gaza Strip, and have called on Egypt many times to open their borders to allow Palestinians to leave. Another example is that they want the resettlement. Let's remind our viewers that Israel had occupied Gaza and withdrew in 2005. They want the illegal Israeli settlers to resettle Gaza. So those remarks are